Welcome to
Hello.
day one, Deed Awareness Week. It's great to have everybody here. I'm here with Tim. I'm here with Grant. We're going to do some formal intros in a moment, but we've got some Corey Wong on in the background, as is Change GPS custom, as everybody rolls in over their lunch break for, well, I think it's going to be an absolutely massive week. We're going to talk about why we're doing this, why it's important. Unbelievable to have this many people take an hour out of their busy week to get some CPD and about trust deeds. I'm going to be quiet for a little bit as we welcome in the hundreds of people that are registered. Tim, who have we got playing at the moment in the background?
This is my favourite artist at the moment, Corey Wong. This song called what's this song called? Not Lunchtime. Limited World. Corey Wong, very funky guitar. Check it out, everybody.
Yeah, nice.
Are you, Grant?
Yeah, good, thank you. And you?
Yeah, really good.
Jump in the chat and say g'day. We can't, when it's not a physical conference, it's an online conference. A lot of people who've never been to Change GPS before, this is the time to have your voice. Jump in the chat group, say g'day. Make sure you tick all panelists and attendees so everyone can see. Just give your name and where you're from and a big hello to everyone. Hello, Cassandra Ferris from sunny Brisbane. Great to have you here.
And it is sunny, it's beautiful.
Wollongong. What's going on in the gong?
Okay.
Nameless in the Gold Coast, but it's beautiful there today. Jonathan in lockdown in Melbourne.
Yeah.
I'm glad we've given you something to do other than lodging tax returns today.
We're on Melbourne. Oh, sorry to all you guys in Victoria.
No, Ryan O'Shea's trying to have a go at me. He's a big Melbourne fan. I'm a big Dogs fan. You're a week too late, mate. We've moved on. We've got more wins since then. Mike from the Shire. Where's the Shire?
Oh, excuse me. It's the Shire thing in Sydney, down the Shire, down the Sutherland Shire.
Oh,
you actually need a passport to get across Tom Ugly Creek from the Shire to the reverse way, I think.
Jason Brown, g'day mate. The public holiday in WA today. He's over in the majestic Margaret River.
Oh, Linfield, very nice. Very swish.
Oh, it's great to hear everybody here. Now, a lot of these people, you're ticking all panelists. Make sure you change your post to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see you and say g'day. It's not quite a physical conference, but at least we can see us here. Maybe you might recognise some names.
How's the screen look, Dave? Can you see that there?
Yeah, I can.
Great. Well, I'm going to ease back on the music.
You should play some of your songs or your music, Tim.
I know, one of these days, love to. Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to Deed Awareness Week. We are finally here. Hi, Dave. Hi, Grant. How are you both?
Good. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. It'll be great. Great session.
Great to be here, Tim. I'm absolutely thrilled so many people are joining us here today. Deed Awareness Week, a whole week of updates with CPD around the humble trust deed. Although, as I think we'll find out today, it's not so humble. It's not a piece of parchment to put on the permanent file and pull out and let graduates wonder over how they used to do things. It's a living, breathing document that needs constant attention. And I think that's going to be one of the big takeaways today.
Very definitely. So, look, we're going to have 5 days of epic CPD. We're going to keep it strictly to 1 hour per day. All these sessions will be recorded. Dave, are the emails going out tomorrow morning? How does everything work?
So look, let's just do a bit of housekeeping. Every day, if you've registered for all 5 days. Now, tomorrow morning, you'll get an email from Change GPS. It'll have the slides from today, a copy of the recording, and any key links to cases or tools that we've mentioned today that'll help you actually implement some of the lessons that we're going through. That will, added to that email, be a reminder about your session that's tomorrow. We thought we'd combine them so we didn't pepper you with more emails than you possibly need. So you're just going to get one that's going to have both in it. It is CPD, so everyone is here live that we know has verified. We're going to be able to issue some CPD confirmation letters for you that we'll do through Lightyear Docs. We give us about a week, we're going to get those out to you. So I'm sure they're going to be treasured and an incentive for those of you who decide to come on and join us live. Now, this stuff's big, and if you've been to Change GPS webinars before, we want you chatting. We want you asking questions, and you can do it in the Q&A or you can do it in the chat. If your question is client specific, unfortunately, it's going to be hard to answer. But if it's general questions, we're going to try to answer them on the fly today. If you don't get the answer, jump on Facebook, Change GPS Community Facebook group, jump in and see if any of your peers can answer it. Myself, Tim and Grant are always there to answer any questions you might have as well. Keep the chat going throughout the day. I'm going to turn my video off. I'm going to be reading all the chat in common. I'm going to interrupt the two geniuses who are running the show today when I see something interesting. But Tim, it's great to finally be here. You've worked really hard all weekend to get this stuff done.
Well, it has been all weekend, but it's been a couple of months in the planning. But, Grant and I, we like fine-tuning everything. So I had a glass of red yesterday afternoon. Grant probably did the same, and we were both working on the same document. Look, why Deed Awareness Week? Let's frame this so we are all aware of it. And by the way, every day builds on the next. So don't miss any of the days. It gets better to, every day builds to Friday. Then Friday we'll be exploring how you can actually update and do things in an amazing way for your clients, and how you can offer these services in a way that your clients will pay and love paying your invoices. Now, deeds and constitutions are the foundation for all business and investment structures. Accountants, and we'll come to this in a moment, sometimes we feel like, oh, this is legal, we can't talk to clients about it. That is rubbish. We need to be talking to clients about these things. And that's why we've got Deed Awareness Week. So we can use the experience that I've had, and in particular Grant's had, over decades of helping to get the right structures in place. Now, accountants, we need to understand the difference between the documents. What's a good document? What's not a good one? And also the difference between document providers. So one of the things from this week is, look, if you've got a relationship with a document provider or a lawyer that helps doing things, great. If you haven't, you need to use someone like Grant and like Docs, and they're the ones that we use, because you need to be a specialist in this area. A generalist just doesn't cut it, and you'll start to understand why. Now, a big thing that I've been pushing for years, since I set up my first accounting business back in 1990, I needed to have a difference to other accountants because I had no clients. So I really focused on asset protection and doing the things that other accountants weren't doing. But during the COVID period of time, I spent a lot of time with Grant trying to look at how we can help our clients and make certain that we're not missing anything. And it's really true that complete asset protection must include estate planning. You can't have one without the other. So getting the control points right is the key to success. And today, Grant will start exploring to us the key areas of control in trusts, tomorrow super funds, and we'll really get into a lot of detail on Wednesday and looking at leading members and bloodline style provisions. So the big thing is we can do great asset protection. We might have a trading company held by a discretionary trust, or we might have a trading trust, whatever it might be. But you know what? If the director is in, say it's a sole director, mum and dad, might be mum as the director, dad's the one at home looking after the kids. Okay, what if mum's in a car crash and she's incapacitated? What happens at that point in time? This is where estate planning comes into play, because we've got the asset protection right, but it doesn't help if that business cannot continue, if decisions can't be made. And a big thing that we'll talk about later on this week is successor directors. Now, if someone's incapacitated or dies, a lot of accountants think, no worries, I'll shoot off ASIC form 484, put in a replacement director. Wrong. You can't do that. You need a legal mechanism to do that. I have seen accountants massacred by ASIC by lodging documents that the clients did not sign, and they will lose their license when they do those sort of things. So we can't do that. Grant will show you this week how you can do everything beautifully and keep yourself very, very clean with the authorities. Now, I've been talking a bit, but I just want to bring this up before we get into it. Online versus lawyer-prepared deeds. Often I hear, and there can be so many myths that we're going to dispel this week, but often we hear it said that that accountants shouldn't be involved in deeds and changes. It's got to be just lawyers. It's not covered under PI and all this sort of stuff. Grant, can we dispel this? Can we just have a look at this right now? What's the go between online and lawyer-prepared deeds?
Look, I think it's pretty important when we have a look at this, and there's obviously different variations. So, I've had a look, and since 2000, when online documents first came in, I must admit I was a decade out from, I missed the boat by a decade there, but essentially there's been more than 3 million companies, trusts, partnerships and SMSFs You have a look at someone like ClearDocs, they've got over 100,000 clients and primarily accountants utilising the service. To date, the best of my knowledge, there's been no litigation against any accountants, etc. In fact, we're going to have a look a little bit later on when we have a look at the case McCanty versus McCanty, which deals with deeds of variation. I'll just briefly look at that. We'll look at it in great more detail on Wednesday. But that was, believe it or not, it was a fairly prominent legal firm in Perth who did two variations. One worked, one didn't. Which was absolutely interesting. So, look, it doesn't matter when you come around and looking at it, as long as when you have a look at the legal services side of the equation, and if you want, we've got a letter of advice there that you can contact us at Lightyear Docs or at Abbott-Family in relation to the preparation of these. Essentially, all the templates are prepared by, usually if you have a look at ClearDocs, it'll be Maddox. If you have a look at Lightyear Docs, it's Abbott-Family, now Infinity. I'm not sure, they keep on switching it every couple of months, I think. But essentially you need all those templates and everything to be built, ideally by a legal firm, signed off by a legal firm. And that really the only thing that you do is put in the data capture. In fact, it's going to get to a stage anyway that with the new system, certainly that we're building at Lightyear Docs, which will be available by the end of the year, the clients will actually be able to fill in the data capture online, and then that completes the document, which even takes you further out of the equation. But look, I know some accountants are extremely conservative, and that's why you'll find that most legal firms have their own sign-off service. So you can go and complete all the documents if you want, and then just let us know what it is, and Abbott-Family will charge extra $200 to do the full legal sign-off. So that's just another thing there for you. So it really depends on where you stand in the whole equation of it. When it's just the setting up and the establishments, I don't think anyone here on this call would actually be worried about doing companies. There's a lot of changes now around electronic signatures in New South Wales. You can actually set up deeds, you can set up wills, etc., all with electronic signatures. Each state has its own. Where the big issue that we do need to have a look at, and everyone is running on, well, I'm finding many people are running on really old deeds, and provided you upgrade the deed in accordance with the variation clause, the amendment clause, provided that is done, then there's no resettlement. So where I see potential exposure out of all of this is in relation to an accountant going ahead and doing a variation of a discretionary trust deed. An SMSF deed is less problematical. That may lead to a resettlement. It doesn't mean that they can't do it. I mean, if you've got an easy amendment clause that just simply says that the trustee can do it, then you're okay. But I'm going to show you a couple of examples later on, and particularly the one where the lawyers are stuffed up as well. So, and you'll see there'll be other ones that you can't necessarily do on the Lightyear Docs side, or any site for that matter, because they're more of an intense legal nature, such as lost deeds, deeds of rectification. Deed of rectification is just simply you might have made a mistake in the original deed, or an amending deed, or beneficiaries, or the name's wrong and the address is wrong, and what you can do is you can go back, and rectification is just fixing up your mistake. Ratification is obviously just ratifying a particular point and then also confirming. So these are all important ones that really are in the lawyer's armoury, and we do those through Abbott-Family, and you won't find those on the site because they are more of that legal nature.
Yeah.
The basic ones, absolutely not.
So with this, what I'm seeing is, like you said earlier, like I feel 100% comfortable myself, as I've been doing this for years, using Lightyear Docs. I used to use other services, but there's reasons why I use the Lightyear Docs ones now, because of the succession and leading members, which we'll talk about on Wednesday. I feel extremely comfortable. In fact, I have many lawyers contact me for advice on how to set up structure. And that's the thing that people don't understand. They think, oh, it's got to be done by a lawyer. A vast majority of lawyers don't understand structures or estate planning And I have lawyers contact me to get my assistance in estate planning and structures. So, and I feel comfortable with that because I've done this for many years. But if, as an accountant, you don't feel comfortable, your option is you can use Lightyear Docs, you can talk to Grant and the team about this, and then what you'll be able to do is they'll charge a couple $100 extra, and they're holding your hand to do it. So that's the choice, and it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, look,
Okay.
and I think it's, as I said, there's been 3 million companies, deeds and all that. So first off, I mean, nothing like going in right at the top and hammering our heads. I mean, we're gonna start to get a few fireworks going off. But I really like to give a hat tip to both Tim and also David for bringing this Trustee Awareness Week. I think it's a really important feature for the industry as a whole, and it's the sort of stuff because it's so foundational. It doesn't get taught at schools, doesn't get taught at PY, and I would have thought it's the first thing that you'd actually get taught. Really, that one is that what structures do you use? Because at the end of the day, that as we go through this week, there's a whole range of different structures. For example, we'll be talking about a hybrid trust or partnerships of discretionary trusts, or a plain vanilla discretionary trust, which there is no such thing, or a leading member / bloodline trust. So all of these have their different characteristics, and notwithstanding even that, whether to have a trustee company or individuals, or like I've seen some people actually have, I don't know how it works, but they've got the trustee company set up, and then the shareholders are actually the trust of the corporate trustee, which doesn't make sense because the step is you have to do the corporate trustee first, or you do the trust itself. So there's no way in the world that the trust can ever hold the shares, because the trust isn't there. And I'll talk a little bit later on, is that one of the elements that we look at Settlors is, I've seen a number of lawyers provide these huge, big testamentary trust documents, which we will be doing at Lightyear Docs very shortly. We tend to just put terms and conditions, but a trust is never a trust. It's just simply a document until it's settled with something. So it needs to be settled with property or cash or something. At that point in time, once it's settled and executed, then it becomes a trust. So we're going to work through all of those so that you now need to start to see the logistics there. And for those people who've had, trustee companies where the shares are held by the trust, that's one that's extremely dangerous, because really no one holds those shares. So it might have been, you can't even do a declaration of trust because the trust wasn't in existence. And again, just simple things that we don't know what we don't know. You'd probably need to do a deed of rectification around that one.
So let's look at the key takeaways. What we're going to move through now is how to read the deed, looking at key trustee definitions. What are the key roles in a trust? Hybrid trusts, we'll examine them. Why not all companies and trusts are the same, looking at the providers. And then as a bonus, we'll have a bit of a chat at the end. We'll get Dave to come on. What is the best trading entity, company or discretionary trust? Okay, so first of all, what is a deed, Grant?
Well, you can see there's a book, and it used to be the famous book on deeds was actually a UK book. And then in the mid-2000s, you can see here the gold, I don't think it's coming up, but anyway, set and on deeds, and you can see the little picture there. So that's my go-to book. It's not very big, and that really goes down to the fact that, deeds aren't like super sophisticated. Deeds and contracts both evolve. So we had the contract to start off with, and for many things, for example, with loan agreements, etc., they're generally contracts. But for example, we could do a deed of loan forgiveness, and you could do that as an amendment to the original contract. But essentially, what we want to do is a deed, and a deed is when we have a look at Seddon, is the most solemn act. And this comes directly from a case that a person can perform with respect to a particular piece of property or other rights. So it goes beyond a contract. So you'll find that the deed has its own, there's a whole set of common laws around the deeds which we can sue on. But also there's a whole lot of stuff, for example, in equity where there's specific performance we can detail, and we can put a lot of that stuff inside a deed. So I really prefer myself to do deeds as opposed to contracts. The keys to a deed, you have a good deed, there's usually, it's like a story, there's the heading, this is what the deed is going to do. For example, it's going to be a deed of rectification because I put this name down and this name has changed or was erroneous, or I put this name down. Quite often is that we might have an LRBA for example, a SMSF, which we'll look at tomorrow. And then what we do is we find out that the property details are not the correct property details. So the banks aren't going to go anywhere near that. So the first thing they're going to ask is for a deed of rectification, which is the trustees getting together and say, oops, sorry, made a mistake. And this is what is the new mistake. And quite often you can go back a number of years, for example, with investment strategies. I know a lot of people have done investment strategies in the past that essentially aren't really compliant with the Commissioner's rules in relation to investment strategy. Don't take into account, for example, members' superannuation interest and their retirement objectives, etc. So you'll see within our investment strategy kit, there's ability to do a deed of rectification. So you can actually go back and overlay the current investment strategy onto prior years. But look, there's a lot of deeds. You've got deed of gifters are really important when we're coming around to obviously do protector. Promissory note, we could just make that as an ordinary contract. But again, we want to make something, just put our hand up and say, well, this is really solemn. This is how it is. So we'll have a heading on what the deed is. Could be an SMSF deed or a unit trust deed or a hybrid trust deed. We then have the recitals, which is basically what the facts of your dealing. So it's the story, it's the process and what you're doing.
And like the background to it.
Yeah, the background. Exactly. And then you go into the provisions of the deed, what you're seeking to do, what you're building on top of that. Then, of course, it has to be executed as a deed, and then you have your signature blocks. So that's essentially the core aspects of a deed, and you'll know whether you've got a deed or not because it'll actually say deed there. If it doesn't say deed, then there's a good element that's just an agreement or a contract at law. One of the big ones, Tim said there is it's important to read the deed. Really, for all of us anyway, deeds, the modern deeds these days aren't that difficult to read, and they're getting even better still. So there's a big area of the law that I know that we're into, that it's not just easy to read, but it should be easy to understand. So we did, for example, the set of competency standards for the SMSF Association, or the SMSF Professionals Association as it was way back in the mid-2000s, and set the standards for RG 146. And one of the core ones there is being able to read, understand and apply the law, which makes sense. And with our latest association that I know Tim's been involved with, from that perspective, what we've got there is we've also got a set of competency standards, again, requiring us to be able to read, understand and apply the law. But the law in and of itself is emboldened within that deed. So where a trustee has a set of powers, for example, if I had a deed and simply said that the trustee is to have all the powers available under the Trustee Act of the relevant state you're in, you say that's okay, but that's not going to last. I mean, you're not going to be able to take that to a bank, because the bank, the first thing they'll want is a whole list of specific powers. Powers to enter into contracts, power to enter into loan agreements, powers to do property development, all those sort of things. So in and of itself, a deed is a set of rules. It is actually a binding set of laws, believe it or not. So that's why it's absolutely crucial for us all to understand what we've got and what to work with. The most important there is, we'll go through, but generally that variation clause you want to have a really good look at. But really having a look at it, it's the same thing. In fact, if you ask me, the hardest thing to do, the hardest piece of legal documentation to look at is bloody trust distribution minutes. And the accountants are doing those willy-nilly, and more importantly, they're giving it to the client. So I don't know why you'd be giving it to the client, because the client just wouldn't have any idea. Investment strategy for a fund, yeah, maybe, but trust distribution minutes, no, because they, again, flow out of what is embedded in the laws of that particular deed. So you need to track it in and see what you're doing. And
so we'll cover those on Wednesday, by the way, for trustees. And that's a great point, because so many accountants go, oh, I don't want to, we shouldn't do this. But then they'll easily do the trust distribution minutes and they can screw them up so badly. So we will talk about that Wednesday.
Well, they're actually a lot harder, believe it or not, because what you are, you believe it or not, you're drafting up a set of laws really in terms of the distribution and covering tax, estate planning, everything within those trust distribution minutes. So it's absolutely crucial on that one. And I just think, again, not to try to get, not trying to scare anyone, because we all want to be in it. But again, I'm just saying that to be able to set up a company or an SPSF or a discretionary trust on the scale of complexity, and PI is probably about a 1 out of 10. The highest ones up around are probably about the 9 out of 10 is more the trust distribution minutes.
Definitely. So let's get into some of the key parts of the trust. So all of us would be aware of settler and appointor. And look, when I started off, I remember my first client was a property developer client, and I had to teach myself how the financial statements for a trust work, because they don't teach you that at uni. And I had to get in, and I actually spent a lot of time reading the deeds, because I did a lot of work with some lawyers that were very good at setting up structures in town. So I immersed myself in this. And I know another time we'll talk about some of the stories you had about when you started learning these things, Grant. But let's smash through these next couple of slides. Settler, what's the point of it? And the appointor, what's the point of it?
Actually, just before I get in, that's quite funny. Just a bit of background. So I came out of university, did a master's of law at that time. I was also the research director of the Tax Institute. Moved on from there. In fact, Sophia, I'm going to look at that one. And from there, I ended up going to KPMG, worked in the insurance and funds management area. I remember once we were doing if you have a look at all the side, for those of you who've been down Sydney, if you have a look at the down at Circular Quay, all Bennelong, all those apartments there were essentially in the Mirvac Property Trust. And I remember going through the deed for that, and it went to about 350 pages long. There was a whole bunch of lawyers, and we spent 3 days, virtually no sleep, going through every word. This shouldn't be A, it should be the, it shouldn't be this or that. So getting down to that level of drafting is really important. And it's also made me be very cognizant of the way that a deed should be drafted up. And I think that's absolutely crucial. Funnily enough, just going back to that trust distribution minutes, I think it's really important is that the prior to really 2010 in Bamford, the commissioner for a long time had been saying you can't stream income, capital gains, frank dividends and all that. So if you've got an old trust deed that essentially predates that, you need to see whether it's got streaming or it's been updated. If you haven't updated it and you've been doing streaming through your trust distribution minutes, you can see there's a big legal mismatch there. So it's crucial, and we'll talk about how to update it.
Well, actually, Grant, we've got a really practical question that's come in from Servia Stravopoulos, and this ties into what this means actually on the ground in day-to-day in practice. I've many old trust deeds and cannot find the clause for the trust distribution minutes. Should I have them updated so that I have the relevant clauses for both income and capital distributions? Well, first of all, Sophia, it's great that you've read it and you know the clause is there. You're ahead of the curve.
So I would say, again, it's like, for example, what's your favourite car, Tim?
Ferrari.
Yeah, Ferrari. So would you take your Ferrari to get serviced at a Mercedes shop?
No, it was...
Why?
Because,
it's a different webinar there, Grant.
Yeah, I know. So when you're looking at it as an analogy, there is you need to really have a system that works. So we'll talk about a little bit later on, like for Sophia. For that one is if you're looking at trust distribution minutes, you want to make sure the trust distribution minutes you have are built in and become one and the same of the deed itself. So that's very easy. If you're using our trust distribution minutes, then we have links into exactly where it fits within our discretionary trust deed. So you can still use ours and put in your own links, but it's probably better to go through the process and say, okay, well, we'll look at that a little bit later on, varying the deed. But let's vary the deed, upgrade it, because then we've got a new modern system that links in with that, if that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that what we're doing is as easy as possible, can be continued on. For example, our trust distribution minutes, if you do them this year and there's not many changes next year, you just have to simply change the date, but it still links directly back into the deed. You are building a new set of laws with those trust distribution minutes. So again, we want to make sure that that whole system is really the same, if that makes sense.
So there's quite a few questions coming in. Some of these, what we're going to do is going to answer every question throughout the week. Some of them we'll get back to one-on-one, but quite a few questions about changing trusts. And so Wednesday we'll focus on trust distribution minutes of resolutions. Friday we'll focus on the actual process of making updates where needed. So
I'll be looking at looking today. I want to make sure there's a nice little slide on resettlement. I want to take that away from them, just so that no one is fearful about that resettlement.
Definitely. So on the pointer.
Yeah. So if I look at the settler is in the old days, the settler was, for example, someone who would put a large property into the trust, set it up. They may have been part of the trust. But these days, the settlor generally is just someone who sets up the trust, who's quite often the accountant. Now, I've seen a number of lawyers say that it's improper, for example, an accountant or advisor to be the settlor and then the advisor to the trust for a range of reasons. So the preference is just get some junior in the office or whatever to actually act as the settlor. In terms of unit trusts, generally it's the unit holders together when they subscribe for the units. That's when the trust is actually settled. So we don't need to see, you won't see a settlor in a unit trust. You probably will see in a hybrid. With a testamentary trust, who do you think this is a question for you, Tim. We'll see how bright you are. Who do you think actually is the settlor for a testamentary trust?
Dead person.
No, it's not. It's actually because the dead person's dead. It's going to be the executor.
I was going to say executor, but I thought I had to. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Because remember, they're the ones with the property and they're settling.
The executor. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll see with all our testamentary trust documents, it's the settlor or the executor or the executory. Now, the big one is the appointor. Now, tell me about the appointor, Tim, because I know you've got.
The appointor is God.
Yeah.
Effectively, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they're the one that can remove the trustee and change it around. So that's the appointor really is the most crucial control point in a trust, isn't it, Grant?
Absolutely. So the appointor, for example, it's like the board. You know, they're the ones who can actually appoint or remove positions, or the trustee or whatever. So that at any point, the appointor, if you don't like the trustee, the appointor can just bin them. So, for example, we can be in a position of having a corporate trustee, husband and wife are both the directors of the corporate trustee. They're in a stinker of a fight, about to go through a separation, and then they can't get anything done. So no one wants to sign, and I have seen this happen so many times. The question then is, who's the appointor? Because if it's one of them, then of course, what are they going to do? They're just going to bin the other trustee, get rid of them, and put in a brand new trustee, for example, corporate trustee, which they're the sole director, or they have friendly directors in there. So the appointor, that controlling mechanism, is absolutely crucial. So we really need to have a look at that. Some of the old deeds, you'll see they're called guardians or principals. And you'll see a little bit later on Wednesday when we get into that leading member, the leading member of the trust, or as basically the leading member appointor. And the crucial thing about it is, when it is so important, we need to have a succession plan in there. Yep. So there's got to be not one line, but we need to have the second line and the third line. which will come out. So when you're building yours, Tim, I mean, how many lines do you go down in terms of
Well, this is what we'll be covering on Wednesday, but this is, look, we're setting the scene today, but for the appointor, it's what Grant has put together in light year docs is brilliant. Looking at the leading member approach, some people call it your bloodline approach. But if I die, I'm the leading member, the successor leading member in our family case will be Lyndall, my wife. And then if anything happens to her, the successor will be Savannah, our daughter. And if anything happens to the three of us, then it'll jointly be my mum and Lyndall's dad. So there's written in stone all the way through. But that's why it's so important getting the concept of the settler and the appointor right in the first place. Now, again, lots of questions coming through. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these questions with Grant at the end of each day, and in your emails each morning, we'll actually give you a quick response to all of the questions so everyone can read that, just so we make certain we don't miss it. So Dave, if we just get the chat out to Grant and myself this afternoon, and we'll actually update and answer the questions and get them out to you.
We might answer when we come around tomorrow, the first 5 or 10 minutes tomorrow. We'll just clear up all the questions.
Some of those, definitely.
And then that way we can move on to the next session. So we clear it up and then move down the track.
So many good questions, everyone. Okay, now the trustee. What's the go with the trustee, Grant?
I think most of us are pretty well aware the trustee is the management of the actual trust. So they're the ones that decision. But again, you need to really have a look at the key ones in terms of the trust are the appointment. So how is a trustee appointed? So again, most ones will be the appointor. There's danger. I've seen a couple of instances where a person who was the appointor and the trustee, sole trustee, died. And effectively you can't do anything. You've got to go to Supreme Court and get that whole thing fixed up, which is going to cost 50 grand. So we need to have that line of succession. With the trustee, do you go a company or corporate trustee? Absolutely. Just be very careful about where the shares are. As I said, you can't have the shares in the trust because it doesn't work that way. So the shares generally will be held by the individual or another trust. Just be careful on that, because if the individual is getting litigated against, then of course that's the easy way for the lawyer to attack the trust assets, because they attack the shares, they put an injunction over anything you can do, and they'll just bleed you to dry for 2 or 3 years, so you can't do anything, everything's foreclosed, and it just puts you in a really bad position. You'll see again on the Wednesday, we've got a really good solution for that one.
I love your solution for that. For everyone that's worried about, okay, who the shareholder of the trustee company should be and how to make certain that you've got a defined way of doing things, even when threatened with bankruptcy, come on Wednesday and Grant will show you the clauses in the constitutions and the trust deeds that he uses. It's a brilliant approach.
Yeah, the big ones are death, dementia, divorce, and of course litigation and trustee and bankruptcy. So the big one for the trustee. So really we need to focus in on who's going to be the principal or the leading member beneficiary. So they're usually the core person. Now, a number of people will have a whole range of people as primary beneficiaries. I'm not a big fan of that, because over time, families fall in and out of favour, so that although they don't have any rights or entitlements, it's probably easy just to have one person there, and that person then it can switch down as we go down a line of succession. But then we can bring in, so the choice is we can then start to bring in their children, their grandchildren, their relatives, any entities that are associated with them as well. And then you can then put another layer on top that then the beneficiaries have to be bloodline of yours. So again, we can, and the bloodline of the original owner of the trust. And I think that this is one thing that we tend to miss out on, that I really love about trusts. And we talk about, Dave's going to be talking about businesses. Trusts are fantastic estate planning vehicles, because, and I'm going to show you a bit later on, to have a perpetual trust is that when we go down with that trust, it just passes from generation to generation to generation, so that CGT and all of those issues that we worry about, and the executor. So for example, if we've got dad in there and he dies, effectively the next person in, or if there's an existing trustee comes in, and they can start paying out benefits to beneficiaries who are the next generation. Whereas if it's in a estate, that's going to take at least 6 months, potentially 5 years if it's getting challenged. And of course, everyone wants their money when they want it.
So do I.
So it's pretty crucial. So the beneficiary years, we could have different corpus beneficiaries, income beneficiaries. If you're in a testamentary trust, we could have, for example, the children or the bloodline children, but they're not allowed to get the corpus, which is pretty typical. We write in there, not allowed to get the corpus until age 25, unless it's for education, health, or buying a home or a deposit as a home. But again, if you're looking at that, you may well want to do the property inside the trust as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that's perfect.
Now, just a couple of the questions and things, I just want to touch on one or two things here quite quickly. Can the appointor be the same as the settlor? They need to be different, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so because the appointor, as I said, in the past, if we had a look at the really old deeds, the settlor and the appointor, the settlor, the guardian, were generally one and the same. These days, the settlor is an in and out. And you've got to be, if you have a look, there's so many rules generally within the deed that a settlor can't have any control in there. Now, that doesn't mean that the settlor, if, for example, if it was a testamentary trust and maybe the executor or whatever, and they've got children in there are going to be looked after, it doesn't mean the settlor can't be the appointor. There's nothing legally against it. It's just preferred not to be. So the settlor is a different person.
So quickly, let's go through unit trusts. Difference with this, like I always describe a discretionary trust like a funnel, and it collects money but needs to pour it out to the beneficiaries, and you can kind of pour it all over the place. But a unit trust is different because we've got fixed amounts, and that's, we obviously use those in certain circumstances. So I suppose key difference, Grant, from your perspective?
Yeah, so with you're quite right, discretionary, obviously the trustee has all the power, and that power is probably strictly limited once we get to a unit trustee. And there's 3 different styles. There's the hybrid, which we'll be looking at a little bit later on. There's the fixed unit trust. So distributions have to come out. And then there's your standard unit trust, which still allows a bit of discretion in terms of when that trust vests as to how the corpus distributions come out. So fixed trusts are really important in New South Wales, obviously, for they're separate entities for land tax. So just be mindful of that, but you lose some of the rules. With the unit trust deed, you're actually going to start to see there'll be different formulas as to how income and corpus is to be distributed. But generally, it's going to be pari passu with, your underlying unit holding, which is pretty simple. And from that, you see there's, we've got the superannuation unrelated investment trustee, which starts at base as a unit trust, but primarily it's got SMSF unit holders who are not related or don't hold more than 50%. You've got your 1322C, which is something that can be wholly owned by a self-managed superannuation fund or a couple of trusts, for example, which would be, for example, a family trust and also a self-managed super fund. And again, it's got some wheels on it, but again, it's got the base of the unit trust. Employee share trust, exactly the same. So a good unit trust deed is really important. And that also goes to obviously the next one, which is going to be the hybrid trust.
Now, hybrid trust, I was going to say, a lot of people have been scared about it because the ATO, and we're not going to go into detail on the ATO's viewpoints, but it's like I've seen so many accountants think, I'm not even going to touch them because the ATO don't like them. Look, the ATO doesn't like anyone claiming a tax deduction either. So I think it's kind of, I don't think it's right to ignore hybrid trusts, and I've actually used them in a number of circumstances. But Graham, take us through your viewpoint on hybrid unit trusts.
Yeah, so if we go back and have a look at them, and there's been heaps around, and a hybrid is essentially you start off with units, and then what will happen is you'll have a nominee, and so the unit holder can nominate who's to receive the distribution. So when we have a look at it, the big one, and look, I agree, where the commissioners come in, if you have a look at that alert in 2008/3, which really there's been no laws that I mean, there's been no hybrid law. So the law is the law. You can't stop it. Where the important thing there is, and I think the Commissioner's fully entitled, is that he looks at an instance where you've got the someone borrowing money to invest in a unit trust, thereby claiming a tax deduction against that unit holding, but then the distributions go to someone else. And of course, there's a mismatch there, and I think there's a number of elements there. But if it's just straight unit holding where there's no borrowing, then from my perspective, there's really no difference between that and, for example, a discretionary trust. And then there's a flexibility there. But of course, you just got to be careful about the corpus. I mean, the Commissioner's also, there's been a couple of ones that I've seen where the underlying units is more like a debenture. So you've got a flat dollar unit, and so that then any corpus or capital gain can also be distributed. Whereas the Commissioner's view is probably more problematic, that the underlying capital gain should really, if there is one, should really go towards the unit holder as opposed to a discretionary element. But look, hybrids are still really important, particularly if you're looking at doctors, etc.
Yeah.
Partnership and discretionary trust. Look,
this is one that's underused, I find, because when you want two family groups to be involved in something and still effectively get some CGT concessions and sale of a business or things, this is an absolute cracker. I think it's great.
It's really very simple, and in fact, you can see most people probably not aware, but like your docs, apart from our larger protector style or asset protection, etc. Most of our docs are only like $99. So in there, we've got a simple partnership which was essentially built virtually as a JV for family or discretionary trusts together, or discretionary trusts and SMSFs. So it's a very powerful structure for that one, and absolutely crucial in asset protection. I mean, at the end of the day, we're sort of stuck, and we're probably not going to have time to look at it this week, but we're stuck because of the tax laws, and that one we just saw, the hybrid trust, is that we have properties in our own name so we can get the negative gearing. We have homes in our own name so that we end up getting that CGT exemption, but that exposes us quite considerably. So when we have a look at that, there's some gift loan back / option deed structures that we probably won't have a look at this time, but certainly there's some great stuff coming around now in that asset protection space, which is all the more important these days.
Awesome. Now, vesting and jurisdiction, very interesting situation recently with South Australia jurisdiction and the length of time a trust can have and what we can do.
Yeah, so as I've got there, this is one that most of you probably aren't really aware of. Each state's got its own trustee act. So when we have a look, and again, for those of you who want to get a bit wiggy on deeds, go and get your Settlors on deeds. I think it's about $180 for quite a small book, but it's definitely worthwhile. But talks about, for example, the Corporations Act. If I went back prior to 2001, each state had its own Companies Act. And so that's why you would always set up you choose your jurisdiction as to where your company was going. And you would remember that, Tim, for when you first started. Okay, I'm going to make the company in Queensland because there was a Queensland Companies Act, and that set of laws would apply to it. But that's no longer the case. You still might put the relevant state, but companies are companies. It doesn't matter where they're set up, because essentially there's federal laws around that. Seddon's argued that we should really have that for trusts and deeds. Look, I agree with that. If you have a look at SMSFs, they're governed by federal law as well. So we've got these outliers being trusts. So one of the key issues there is that when we look at the laws that apply to that trust, generally we've got an opportunity up front to choose the jurisdiction in the laws, much the same as we used to do with companies. So you can choose New South Wales or Queensland or whatever. Now, if you fail to choose that, then under what we call a conflict of laws principle, and you can read, there's pages on this in Seddon and also NI's conflict of laws, we need to find out what's the appropriate jurisdiction. And that might be hard because we might have a trustee here, another trustee somewhere else. We might have a property in Western Australia, property in Queensland. So we've got to actually find which jurisdiction applies if something comes around. So that's why it's really crucial to put in the jurisdiction up front. Now, with that one, many people are, and again, you've got to be careful, but the South Australian Trustee Act, effectively much the same as the SIS Act, excludes the rule against perpetuities. So, for example, if you set up a self-managed super fund, there is no rule against perpetuities applying to it. So although we've got the state-based Trustee Act, and then we've got the SIS Act will always override it because it's covering Commonwealth area. And that goes back to the Tasmanian Dams case. So when we have a look at that one, if we choose South Australia, then we've got a deed in perpetuity. So that should follow. We set up a corporate trustee, and then we set up our discretionary trust at the same time.
So that means instead of lasting 80 years and having a vest, trust goes on forever, effectively.
Correct. And so then you'll still have vesting, which is a wind-up clause, but for most states, there's a forced wind-up clause, which is really interesting because I've been asked many a time, well, can we just go and upgrade the deed and change jurisdiction? And it never came out. And then there was a case I only just saw last year, which is quite interesting, that this was a 1971 trust deed for the Fairfax employees. And it housed, it's got millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. And they were running up against time in New South Wales because, again, the rule against perpetuities would mean from their perspective that effectively it would have to, actually, I think it was in 1971, it'd have to be wound up at some point in time. Of course, it'd be capital gains and a whole lot of issues. So they went to the South Australian Supreme Court and sought the ability, because there was no ability within the deed itself to change jurisdiction. It went to the South Australian Supreme Court, and then they chose South Australia for the sole reason such that the rule against perpetuity doesn't apply. So for those of you, if you want to look at that, Clark versus Ebden, and that now gives us that authority that we can change jurisdiction of current trusts in order to get to that perpetuity. So I think if you have a look at that, if you have a look at Bamford, if we look at the stuff we're looking at Wednesday, there's more and more this inclination for us. The saying that we regularly change SMSF deeds is that we regularly start to upgrade our discretionary trust deeds as well, particularly anyone that's predating 2000 would be the case.
So are all deeds the same when we look at this? We've got yours on the left. Yeah, so if you have a look there, I mean, this is, again, amendments. So this is from my deed. So at any time, from time to time prior to the termination date, which is the vesting date, the trustee with the written consent of the appointor, again, it shows you the importance, the time being may by deed alter, vary or revoke any trust or provision hereunder, other than this clause, which is the amendment clause, clauses in 7 and 8, and again, but not so as to benefit the settler, again, that sort of thing. So clauses in 7 and 8 are actually the appointment of the appointor and also the removal of the trustee. So you can't amend that to change that. Second one, which is quite interesting, appoint and resettle the trust fund or any part thereof and the income to arise therefrom in the manner and upon trust subject to conditions of what. So what that means is the trustee is empowered in there to take an asset out of that trust. And again, this is used as a base for our testamentary trust to then go and create a separate subtrust. Now, when they create and they take an asset out, just solely for those beneficiaries into a separate trust instrument, which has got power to do here, so virtually like cloning a trust, then there's obviously going to be a brand new trust. Whereas if we have a look here at the McCanty versus McCanty, and this is the one where, as I said, the legal firm did all the drafting, and one was in line with it and one wasn't, which was quite interesting. But look at this, subject to clause 10 hereof, the trustees for the time being may at any time and from time to time by deeds revocable or irrevocable, revoke, add to or vary all or any of the trust terms and conditions hereinbefore contained,
I can't even read this, there's just so much rubbish, or the trust terms and conditions contained in any variation or alteration or addition made thereto from time to time may in like manner declare any new or other trust. So, and you can see it keeps on going because there's no full stops. And I haven't got the other three, but there's no full stops. So I actually worked out that sentence has 350 words to it. So there's a good chance there that if we did this, that variation we made is not going to fit. Just mindful of.
I know we're running out of time. So what I thought we might do is that we're just going to go to a few things that we want to make everyone aware of that you can take away from today. And then because we've had so much content, we tried to keep it to an hour, but we're going to go for a few minutes afterwards. We're going to cover off ASB 2020-02, which is a massive issue. We're going to cover off non-foreign beneficiary trusts and resettlement, but we're going to do that in a moment, and also company discretionary trusts. But we know a few people need to finish at 1, but you're going to get the recordings, and Grant and I are going to stay on, so don't leave. Dave, what have we got to assist everyone here today with moving forwards with any updates to deeds and things like that? Because as we progress throughout the week, we want to make it easy for you to get the message to your clients. So what are we going to do, Dave?
Look, and it's the big question is, why is Change GPS doing a session like this? And it's because you're going to sit here and you're going to learn all of this stuff. And I can already see in the comments, does Change GPS have anything to help me send to my clients? They understand this is important. The answer is absolutely. And if you're a GPS member, if you're a GPS member, upgrade to Engage now. You get it 50% off anyway. If you're already a GPS member, that's automatic. You don't need to do anything. But if you're not, jump onto changegps.com and put in Engage for 4 months free. What we're putting into Engage are all the service descriptions that you need to educate your client on what you are the work you are actually doing to update their deeds. So if you think the deed needs to be updated, if you think there needs to be a resettlement event, if it's that dramatic, all the things that we've gone through today, we're writing out all of the content for what it should be. We're going to put it as a service description into our engagement app, Change GPS Engage. You get 4 months free. It's dirt cheap. It's $100 a month. If you're not a GPS member, $50 a month if you are a GPS member. And we're going to get that content in there for you to help you actually take this to your clients. Now, today, what we're speaking about, I mean, the beauty of Grant is he actually quotes legislation. But you can't quote legislation to clients. They're not interested. We're going to give you the words and the language to help you talk to the clients. Later on in the week, we're going to show you some emails you can send out to your clients to really get them engaged with this issue. And it's a bit timely because if you need to make some changes to a deed, you might want to do it before 30 June to maximize your distribution options or your asset protection options, depending on the type of conversation you're having with the client. So to changegps.com.au, Change GPS Engage, you get 4 months free using the code below. May Paulings asked if she can see all the service descriptions and Engage. May lodge a service ticket, that one. We'll make sure somebody gets out and answers that for you. Some other admin as it's coming through. Tomorrow morning, you're going to get a recording of today's session as well as all the slides and your link to your session tomorrow morning. So for those people who have to drop off because they've got 1 o'clock meetings, probably some tax planning meetings, I would have thought, Tim. Thank you very much for joining us.
We'll be going for about another 10 or 15 minutes just to finish off the rest of this, okay? So, yeah, probably doing tax. But tomorrow, don't forget SMSFD Day. We're going to do a deep dive into this. And also Frank Lasparta from Seamless SMSF will come through with 7 massive SMSF audit problems and how to avoid them. But don't go. Stay with us. We're going to go through company. Oh, sorry, we've got a poll first, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah, look, just a quick poll, and look, just mindful of time, guys. If you want to have a chat to Grant or GPS, I think, Tim, you've got the poll there in the settings on your screen.
Let me just find here. Yes.
If you do want to catch up, look, this is free CPD for you. If you want to use Lightyear Docs or Change GPS to help you out, just answering the poll quickly. That poll is going to run in the background, and I'm going to hand it back to Tim and Grant to probably another 10, 15 minutes of action-packed trust content.
Fantastic. So let's change this around a little bit, Grant. Let's go through the resettlement and foreign trusts case study, and then the bonus. What's the best trading vehicle? What is the big myth with resettlements that many accountants seem to cling on to something that's in the past that actually doesn't happen?
I think what happens is, like anything that we go through life and we pick up a belief, for example, and then what we do is we don't change it. So up until Clark's case, which was in 2010, following commercial nominees in 2009, the commissioner had effectively ruled and told everyone that any amendments to a deed would create a resettlement. So when it means it's a resettlement, means a brand new deed or brand new trust. And of course, the commission would argue that for trust losses, and you'd understand why. So you can't carry forward; it's all blown away. And that's the beauty about the underlying discretionary trust, is that if it continues on down the track and doesn't create a new deed at all, a new set of rules, we can pass down capital losses forever. We can pass down whatever. Completely different from unit trust, because unit trust we can work out who's a controller, etc. So the commissioner sort of got into a little bit of a problem there, and then issued this tax determination. It's got does CGT event E1 or E2 in sections 104-55 or 104-60 of the Income Tax Assessment Act happen in terms of a trust? So that means, does there a change of thing? If the terms of a trust are changed pursuant to a valid exercise of a power contained within the trust's constituent document or varied with the approval of relevant court. So again, if we have a look at that, we need to make sure that we know how it's going to be varied, and it's to be varied. So if it says it has to be varied with the appointor's consent, then you do that. And commissioners come back and said no. So, and this is really crucial. Have a really good look at that, because it also gives, it shows how there's no resettlement if you change the beneficiary, if you change the vesting date. I know there's been a couple of questions there. That case, Clark and Ebden, dealt with a New South Wales trust with New South Wales property, New South Wales trustees, employees, which were primarily outside South Australia, but they still moved everything to South Australia. It's the jurisdiction that is important, not where the underlying assets are. So that's the crucial. But if you don't have the jurisdiction, then you've got to have a look at where the business, the trustee, and the assets are. So in this one, even though Clark and commercial nominees were decided in the context of where the changes in a continuing trust were sufficient to treat the trust as a different taxpayer for the purpose of applying relevant losses, the ATO accepts the principles set out in those cases have broader application. Relevantly, the principles established by those cases are also relevant to the question of circumstances in CGT event E1 or E2 may happen as a result of changes being made in terms of existing trustee pursuant to a valid exercise of power in the deed, including a power to amend. A lot of those principles, the ATO accepts that a change in the terms of the trust pursuant to exercise of existing power, including amendment to the deed of a trust or court-approved variation, will not result in the termination of trust, and therefore subject to the observation paragraph 27 below will not result in a CGT. Now, what they're looking there is in paragraph 27, and this applies exactly the same for stamp duties as well. It's where you take an asset and then you settle it into another trust or a sub-trust. So that's the only exception to the rule. So that resettlement issue is just really, it means you've got some creaky old cobwebs in your mind that you knew from 2010 and just haven't kept up to date with what the modern trust theory is. And it makes sense. And these are high court cases too. So it's not like an AAT decision.
Yeah. And so, look, if anyone's got any questions about this, on Friday, you'll see how you can update deeds and things. But if you're just not winning a second, look at it by someone else. Grant, the team at Abbott-Family lawyers as well will be able to assist you and hold your hand to make certain that you feel comfortable with that. But I think this is a big myth that it's great to bust right now, that we can make those changes with trusts. And it's not going to trigger stamp duty or CGT in the majority of situations. Now,
actually, just while I'm there, the Commission Act guideline specifically talks about how a change in vesting day effectively is not a resettlement. So for those of you who are looking at potentially changing to South Australia.
And a lot of questions about moving to South Australia. Grant and I will do the Grant and Tim notes at the end of each day with all these questions. And I think, Grant, you might be able to do another session at Lightyear Docs and your weekly webinars, maybe about South Australia and moving across.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and another one will be on for about another 10 minutes, everyone, and then we're done. Another one, non-foreign beneficiary trusts. This was a big one, and there is a key date for New South Wales trusts. I think it was 31st of December, but
Yeah,
briefly, do you want to take us through and what we can do to upgrade trusts in this situation?
yeah, it's a bit of the way they've done it is pretty, I'm going to use a colloquial term, bastardry, really. So ordinarily what happens is they've done it a very clever way, and it may well be the future of drafting, because what it is if you've got property in a trust, you are assumed that potentially there could be a foreign beneficiary. So of course it's always the case because it's a discretionary trust in nature. So what the various Office of State Revenues or state revenue officers or revenue, etc., required was deeds to be upgraded to exclude foreign beneficiaries. In some in South Australia, they had to exclude appointors as well, obviously, because they're again, you can see South Australia is pretty smart on the trust side. Is they're aware of the power of the appointor. In New South Wales, you actually had to not only exclude the foreign beneficiary, but you also had to make sure that that clause couldn't be varied as well. So a lot of people went through and varied it. Setting a discretionary trust up now to buy a property, then obviously you're going to make sure it has non-foreign beneficiaries, so you don't pay that 8 or 9% surcharge. But the big one is that land tax. There's a land tax of 2%. So just be careful, because I have seen a couple of people pinged with that recently, because it's easy money for the OSR to come and check. And also they can tell whether your deed has been upgraded, etc. So be very careful on that one.
Awesome. Okay, so two things.
I think you've got the other one there, Tim, which is really important, is that AASB.
Right. Oh, yes. So we'll go back to that. Thanks, Graham. This is something that has just come out recently, AASB 2020/02. Now, this is new standard, starts from 1st of July 2021. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the week as well, especially on Friday with self-managed super funds. But this is the go. If you have any private for-profit entities, in other words, 99.9% of our clients. So you think of your clients, this applies to 99% of them. If their constituting document, in other words, if their trust deed or SMSF deed, a partnership agreement or company constitution says there's a clause in every one of these deeds normally about, okay, you need to prepare annual financial statements, annual accounts. If that document uses the words, they need to comply with Australian accounting standards, as many older deeds have, all of a sudden they cannot be special purpose. They need to be general purpose financial statements from 1st of July 2021, which means massively increased amount of work, notes. You need to check that everything that you do follows every single accounting standard. It's going to be horrendous. So that's a big issue. So right now, effectively, you need to check every company constitution and every trust deed in the accounting clause or financial statements clause. And if it's got the words that they need to comply with Australian accounting standards, you need to change that deed or constitution to remove that, because otherwise it's going to cost your client triple or quadruple. Grant, what do you think?
I think really from that, because it applies where you obviously vary the deed or whatever, so it's not an automatic application to all ones. But look, I would never put down, you have to apply to Australian accounting standards. But you're quite correct, Tim's. Many of the older deeds we see do have that requirement. I think out of all of this, at the end of this trust deed week, it's probably not a bad idea for every accountant to sort of sit down and say, okay, well, maybe it's a good idea to bring all of our deeds into a modern format.
Everything in a one way, hey?
Exactly. So, and look, I'd love to help you out at Abbott-Family and light your docs, but the main thing is just to have a good, consistent system that enables you to basically do everything, which is really crucial. So, and this is just another, Jimmy, it's just another little nail on the coffin. Look, from a number of the things we've talked about, it seems to me it's not a bad idea, and I think Tim will come up with it. But a nice letter going to our clients, just saying that discretionary trusts have, there's a lot of changes going on. This AASB means it's going to be a lot more expensive for you. We're mindful of the fact of this, and so on and so forth, and then go through the process of updating the deeds. So you just get a data capture, and that data capture can, potentially feed straight into.
And the worry about this one for me isn't just that it's going to be more expensive for the client. The average accountant, I'm not sure, has the time or the skill sets to start putting together general purpose financial accounts.
You don't even want to go down that route, Dave.
I know. You'll go work for the Big Four if you want to do that sort of work. I think this is, like, from a business strategy point of view, if you're a partner in a practice, you don't want to be doing general purpose accounts. I don't know how, if you can find the time, get on top of this one. That's not work, on my experience, the average Change GPS member wants to be doing.
It just doesn't make sense.
And what we'll do is we'll show you on Friday how you can actually go through and look at all of your clients in a quick way using BGL software of making certain that they're up to date, or honing in on which clients need to be brought up to date. But Grant, I agree with you. Most of our stuff, all our recent clients for the last 2 years have been in Light U Docs. Prior to then, they're on a few other providers. I want to bring all of ours into the one suite of documents. If there's any change need to be made, we can make those. And look, lots of questions coming through. We will cover off on all these questions and put a document together so we can do that. So you can all be aware of it.
We've got to. We didn't cover hybrids. It doesn't matter. But just before we finish, maybe we can just go into and leave this as a question, open-ended question for people. If you just want to go up a bit, Tim. So, this little, okay, so this one. So just leave this and we'll send it out. And then what I want to do is have a look at it tomorrow morning. And so you can all, something to ponder on, and obviously have a nice glass of Vinalba Malbec, or, something from the Barossa. So we've got John Smith, and he's on his second marriage. He's the sole appointor and trustee because he fears loss of control. And I've seen this happen a lot. The trust holds $2 million. And I want you to give advice. So what happens? John is sued. So he's an accountant. John's sued for tax advice he gave. So what's going to happen there in terms of that trust? Because we tell everyone that these trusts are effectively protected from litigation, etc. A $1 million judgment is awarded against John. He can't pay, and the trustee in bankruptcy attacks the trust. And that's because he's obviously the sole trustee. His second wife leaves him, has an accident, is in a coma. What happens to that trust? He dies. What happens to that trust? So it's the same. It's, again, those big ones, the litigation, it's the dementia, it's the incapacity, it's the divorce, it's the death, and then it's the trustee in bankruptcy. They're the big five that we need to really use that spotlight to shine against all of our structures, for that matter, to see how they're impacted. And once we know how they're impacted, and it's great, we've got some lawyers coming down this week to give us their insight on how they attack it, because once we know how they attack it, then it's easy to build and fortify an offence and a defence around it, so that we can make the moat bigger and bigger.
That is a great thought, Grant. And Thursday we'll have other lawyers here that will do that. But yeah, learning what they attack. And also a really interesting point I'm going to throw up there on Thursday, accountants, are we going to put ourselves in a position of conflict of interest if we're helping mums and dads, but at the same time, one of them says, hey, listen, that's fine. If mum goes and we're going to protect your assets, dad, who do you owe your duty of care to when you're advising clients? Is there a conflict of interest? How does that all work? So that's very interesting. So we'll come back to this case study as we go throughout the week. Final thing to go through. What is the best trading vehicle, company or discretionary trust? Now, I know, Dave, you did a From the Trenches podcast episode, and you've got, recommend to everyone to listen to it. And you've got an article there from Grant, an article from Rebecca Mahalik talking about that. I've got a few thoughts which I'd like to throw in there, but Dave, why is this question coming up?
It comes up so often because we love the income streaming and the tax minimization strategy of a discretionary trust. but we can be very short-sighted sometimes in recommending that structure because we don't ask key questions about what the client wants to do in 5, 6, 10, 15 years' time. And those key questions often are, will you be introducing other equity partners in? Do you want employees to be able to work in this? Do you have a next generation in your family who can logically take over the running of the business? Is this a business that you're just running to generate cash flow or because you want to get a capital gain out of it in a capital sale? And if we're not asking these, and these to me are like not from the Trenches podcast, but these are from the Trenches questions you get from your experience, where you know that what the client's intentions are actually make a difference in the structure. Clients in general don't know the difference between companies or discretionary trusts. They hear about one or the other from their mates who they talk about who are in business because their mate's accountant recommended something. And without any consideration of their unique position, they think it might be valid for them. Your job is to educate them. So that's why this keeps coming up. Discretionary trusts by themselves, and Grant's got a range of amendments that can be made to trust deeds to help them solve some of these problems. But for me personally, the company solves a lot of problems if it's for a trading business where the goal is to make as much money as possible and sell it for a small fortune.
Yeah, look, I think the company's the worst when it comes around to asset protection, obviously, but it's the problem about, discretionary trust would be great if we had the ability to not distribute or not forced to distribute, so we could actually run a capital account there. But with a company, we still can have the trading company, which we've talked about before, but you have all the jewels of the company, like the databases, the IP and everything in that family protection trust, and then lease it back to the company. Because it also means you're siphoning money out of the company and squishing it down through the family trust. So that to me is probably the optimal tax asset protection estate planning operation.
I just want to touch on something Grant and Tim and Eleanor Shakeshift has made this comment, and maybe some of you listening are feeling like this. The more you guys discuss this, the more I feel vulnerable without all the full facts around this. Here's a hard truth. Everyone can stick their heads in the sand. We can all pretend like change isn't happening. We can all pretend like this stuff isn't out there, and we can go about doing what we do every single year and just rinse and repeat for the clients all the time. If you're on this webinar, you're ahead of the curve. You at least want to know what you don't know. You're miles in front, miles. I promise you, Grant, Lightyear Docs, and Tim and myself and the Change GPS team, we're here to help. We're raising awareness about these issues, and we're building solutions and investing our own cash to help solve some of these things because we just think it's so critical. And Tim and Grant are sitting there still advising clients. I don't advise clients anymore. So I really rely on the conversations that they're having. I advise accountants now, Tim. They're my clients. I'm much happier in that world. I can understand the feeling of being vulnerable at the moment. We're here to help. And that's the clear message, Tim.
So look, a few takeouts. Number one, we'll talk later on this week about SEPEPA, the new, I suppose, how would you call it, Grant? SEPEPA, not an industry body, but it should be.
Yeah, no, it's a new industry body because it's a new industry. Well, I shouldn't say it's the first time that we've brought succession, which we've talked about today, and Appointor is crucial. Succession, if you have a look at, if you've got a family company and which is best, family business, which is best, is it a company or discretionary trust? I would say if it's going to be in generations to come, it's always going to be a discretionary trust. So if we have a look at that, asset protection, estate planning, that's a whole area itself. And we've got our first ever course coming up in July. So that, again, going back to what David's saying is that some of us, we just get, the good thing about today is that there's 4 levels of skill. So the first one is unconscious incompetence. So I don't know what I don't know. My head's in the sand. It's all just a bit of a worry. Many of you have just gone on, and we'll get to a lot of stuff this week. Issue with that conscious incompetence. It's like, I understand all these things, but shit, I'm a bit worried here. By the end of the week, and particularly for those of you who go onto the course, you're going to get to that conscious competence where you're going to feel really confident about the systems and what you're doing so that you can recommend to clients exactly what's going on for their position. And then ultimately the mastery is when you get to that unconscious competence, where you can actually start to drill into the client, say, okay, well, this is the structures and strategies we're going to build for you.
Definitely. And look, The course that Pepper's running in July, we'll give you the details about that. I'm going to be there and others from my business, Change Accountants and Advisors. That's how you're going to grow your skills. Grant runs 1 or 2 webinars every week for Light Year Docs. Go along to those, listen to the recordings. That's how you grow your skills. You have to invest a little bit of time in yourself. Now, I just want to, I suppose, put my final things in for company or discretionary trust. If you've got R&D, has to be a company. In Queensland, with the building services, crazy government organisation, don't tell them not, but anyway, it needs to be a company. It doesn't work well with
Stop recording that bit.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But if you've got fixed entitlements that need to go out and you're going to grow something with employees, needs to be a company. Now, my preference, obviously, if you just got one, and this is what we've got in the Business Structure Wizard and Change GPS to give you that advice. Now, if you've got like one family group, you're not going to have others from outside the family join. Discretionary trust, fantastic. But if you're going to sell it, does it need to be a corporate environment? Because if you get to business to a larger, millions of dollars of turnover, millions of dollars worth of profit, it's hard to sell a trust because you're going to have a corporate entity, a larger corporate buy you, maybe want to consolidate or do whatever. So there's no one size fits all. You need to look at every circumstance. And secondly, sometimes what's right at the beginning needs to morph and change into something later on. I've got many clients that started off through a discretionary trust with a company trustee, and they went really well. They've gone for 10 or 15 years. All of a sudden, they've had a breakout. Now they're making millions of dollars, and they've got a international corporate wants to buy them. Now, you need to think, do we need to set up the play, roll over from a trust to a company, give it a few years, settle it all down, and get it ready for the payout? So these are things that we need to think about with our clients. So there's not one size fits all, but we need to be alert to things. And like Grant said, maybe a trading company with the shares held by a discretionary trust with leading member provisions in each, that gives you a beautiful situation where you've got some protection and at the same time, you've got the corporate environment over there. So
one of the problems you're going to face though is we're finding particularly what I'm finding a lot is the concern about family law. Family law, if you set things up right, you can at least, you can find that some of those assets aren't matrimonial property. You just can't do that with a company. It's one in, all in when you've got a company. So again, there's those 5. Where do you want to fit in there? And when we get round to a lot of this stuff, particularly around the sub-pepper, it's a matter of finding which is most important to your client and then building it, the relevant structure around there.
Yeah. Look, I think we'll finish there. It's been great to have somebody online. Grant, thank you for an absolute masterclass. I can't wait to come back tomorrow with super funds.
Oh,
don't forget.
That's my specialty. So wait until you see some of the stuff I've got for tomorrow.
People, you are going to love this. So we'll get straight into super fun stuff first up tomorrow. We had to set the scene a bit today with what this week's all about. I'm sure you've loved it though. We'll answer all your questions in email tomorrow morning. That's what we're going to cover off tomorrow. And don't forget, if you're not using Change GPS Engage, you can get it for 4 months for free. And by the end of the week, we'll have all of the engagement content that you need to, with confidence, get your clients up and running and loving you for your advice. Dave, do you want to finish off, mate?
Look, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I know how busy it is. It's an absolute credit to you that you're spending time to upskill yourself. I've just seen 6 accountants have signed up to Change GPS Engage using that code Engage4. It's a fantastic product to keep you compliant with the APS requirements, but also once we get these new content pieces in, engage your clients in some of the stuff we're talking about today. We just want to make this stuff as easy as possible for you so you don't have that sinking feeling that you're missing out and you can't compete, you can't catch up. You absolutely can. We know, we see it every single day. I know you can do it. I believe you can do it. And Change GPS and Light Year Docs are going to make sure we make it as easy as possible for you. We will see you all tomorrow, but one final thing for me. If you want the chat to keep going, if you've got more questions, head to the Change GPS Facebook community group. There's some fantastic conversations in there. I know it's a high quality conversation because I delete the comments that I think are a bit sloppy or that somebody could have just done a quick search on the ATO site and found out for themselves. We don't want to waste your time with that. Ask us the hard stuff. Chuck it in the chat.
Well, jump in the Facebook group right now and tell everyone else there how much you love today. Because we just want to help more accountants to come along and enjoy it. So put a few testimonials on there about how you've enjoyed today and encourage your friends to join us tomorrow.
Live
Grant.
attendees get CPD.
Grant, you were fantastic.
Oh,
Thanks.
thank you, guys. Oh, it's just great for everyone to learn and be in that learning zone.
Awesome. We'll see you 1 o'clock tomorrow, everyone. Bye.